Is Gen Z right about there being more than two genders? I don't know. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But we're going to try to figure this out together right now. What's going on, everybody? It's the Gen Zer back at it with another banger. Now, here today, guys, we're going to read this article by Time Magazine titled How Gen Z Changed Its Views on Gender. And we're going to provide our own commentary and analysis and try to decipher together, is Gen Z accurate regarding this topic? Is Gen Z correct? Is Gen Z wrong? Is Gen Z right? I believe, before we start reading this article, I believe that we have to understand that it's a very nuanced topic. And there's a lot of different viewpoints regarding that topic. But it's best for us to read the literature out there about it and see what's true and what's not. So let's start, guys. And just a precursor to this, I just want to let you guys know that I haven't read the article yet, and everything that I'm reading right now, I'm gonna read it with you guys. So the article starts by saying, when I talked to teens for my book iGen in 2015 and 2016, most were skeptical about transgender identities. They're just confused, said one. Another said they weren't born that way. I feel like they're denying their previous existence. They're not true to themselves, and I kind of don't like it. Those beliefs, it turned out, were so mid 2010s. In a 2019 poll, two-thirds of US adults said that they had become increasingly supportive of transgender rights over the last 5 years. Today's teens not only support transgender rights, but also home from school excited when one of their friends comes out as trans. I'm sorry, but arrive home from school excited when one of their friends come out as trans. So I believe that Gen Z is a broad generation, right? Gen Z is a very large generation. And even within Gen Z, there are cultural differences. An older Gen Zer, such as myself, I'm already putting my age out there, but I'm not going to expose myself any further. But let's just say I am on the older spectrum of Gen Z. We certainly were exposed to different gender ideological dynamics growing up than, let's say, the later members of Gen Z. When I was growing up, especially when I was in middle school, yeah, we man, the things that we would say and get away with, especially regarding gender, would get us canceled with a heartbeat. Within a heartbeat, would get canceled. But nowadays, Gen Z, Gen Z is much more accepting of multiple genders and different gender dynamics. In my opinion, I believe that it's positive in some aspects. Gen Z is a very accepting generation. Gen Z is much more likely to intermingle and commingle with people whom other generations might perceive as different. Gen Z is much more inclusive in that manner. But as far as inclusivity goes, I do feel that at times Gen Z tries to bring about inclusivity, which is a bit forced. Dare I say, Gen Z likes inclusivity in the sense of race, or as we're discussing here, gender, but inclusivity of different ideas of thought, different ideas or different schools of thought is sometimes not too welcome by Gen Z. So that would be one critique which I have. But let's continue here with the article and see what it says. But how much have things really changed? When I started writing a new book about generations, I knew it would be important to revisit Gen Z's views around gender, including non-binary and transgender identities. So when I was coming up, transgendered people were referred to as hermaphrodites. I mean that, and that's not to be derogatory or anything, but that's how they were addressed, right? That was my understanding of what a transgendered person was, or whom a transgendered person was. That was the term which was widely utilized, and I'm if I'm not mistaken, that was the socially acceptable term, and that wasn't meant to be derogatory or anything. Now, non-binary is a completely new concept dare I say, a very recent phenomenon, because that is a term that I did not hear until I attended college. I didn't hear of non-binary in middle school, high school, and I really heard about non-binary as I was leaving college. So that is definitely a new development in Gen Z gender dynamics. Samuel Ray Bernstein, then a 15-year-old high school California, or the 15-year-old California high school student, gave TEDx talk in 2018 titled "Transgender is not a scary word." He described growing up as a girl and thinking he was not allowed to be himself. I'm sorry, he was not allowed to be anything else. Guys, I apologize for my horrible reading. I have consumed a bit of alcoholic content at the moment. I do not, I can't allow that to excuse my poor reading skills at the moment, but we'll get through that. By 13, he was so unhappy with his body, he started cutting himself. Wow, sheesh. Um, just a just a service announcement, guys. Listen, do not harm yourselves. You are all great just the way you are. And I'm not saying that in a way to say, if you have some deficiency about yourself, do not work to better yourself. I'm not saying that. But physically inflicting harm upon yourself is never good, guys. It is never good. And if you do feel that way, please go seek professional help. Moving on. Then he read about being transgender online, realized who he was, and began to feel whole again. Transgender should not be a scary word. No identity should ever be scary or weird or shameful, he said. We need to focus less on what makes us different and more on what makes us the same. For Gen Z, those born between 1995 and 2012, going back to what I said earlier about Gen Z being a broad generation, the whole concept of gender is more fluid. Now, I certainly agree with that. Gen Z does see gender on a spectrum. Gen Z does not have a rigid uh, structure of gender. You see, prior generations saw gender in a binary structure. You see, they saw gender as consisting of men and women. Those were the only two categories within which one could essentially be labeled in previous generations. You were either a man or you were a woman. Now, of course, I'm sure previous generations understood that there were men who were much more effeminate and there were women who were much more masculine in their behaviors, but they didn't make a distinction for these different attributes and different characteristics. They didn't make a separate gender distinction for them. Gen Z, as far as I understand, Gen Z has a spectrum of gender, which I don't think other generations can even begin to catch up with. I'm having struggle. I'm having trouble in a struggle just catching up with the different genders which Gen Z has created, and that's not to be derogatory or to essentially to talk badly about Gen Z's beliefs, but it's a lot, man. Unless you're actively trying to keep up with this, it's going to be a lot. It's going to go over your head very quickly. Let's get back to our reading here. Not only can people be transgender, identifying with a gender different from the sex assigned at birth, but they can identify as neither male nor female, often called non binary, sometimes shortened to NB, the phonetic of NB. Wow. Wow. I didn't know that. Did any of you guys know that? If you did, please let me know in the comment section. There's also gender fluid, gender queer. Now, speaking of the word queer, that was a slur back in the days. When I was in middle school and high school, that was a slur. If anybody called you queer, those were fighting words. Them was fighting words. Oh, but nowadays, people proudly declare themselves as such, and even people who were homosexual back in the days did not want to be called queer. People who were openly homosexual did not want to be called queer. But however, times have changed, my boys. Times have changed. My boys and girls, times have changed completely. Demi boy, demi girl, and many other terms describing self definitions of gender. Gen Z speaks a whole language of gender, often barely understood by their Gen X and even millennial parents, or by most people just a few short years ago. They're cisgender or cis, someone whose gender identity is congruent with their sex assigned at birth, who's not transgender. There's AMAB, assigned male at birth, and AFAB, assigned female at birth, terms meant to express that sex is assigned by others. There's also agender, someone who doesn't identify with having a gender at all. This rainbow of identities is why Gen Z thinks it is important to state your pronouns. For example, she, her, he, him, they, them, as it may not be obvious which set someone prefers. And if someone states their pronouns, that makes it easier for non-cis people or friends to then say their pronouns without having to be the first to say it. A young woman told the authors of Gen Z explain. Wow, that there's a lot to unpack there. Yeah, Gen Z and the pronouns. I'll just give you guys my honest opinion. It is a bit ridiculous, Gen Z and the pronouns is a bit ridiculous. Now, I'm not saying that I don't want people to feel included or to feel respected or to be addressed as they wish to be addressed. But I do think it is a bit of virtual signaling when you're letting people know your pronouns, if especially when you clearly identify as the gender and the sex which you are assigned at birth. If you are a female and you identify as a cisgendered woman, why do you need to write she, her, hers in your bio? That clearly shows me that you are obviously virtue signaling. You're virtue signaling, trying to show that you're holier than thou. That is just my personal opinion. If you guys disagree, once again, please come for me in the comment section, and I am more than happy to debate you. And we can continue discussing this topic further. But in my personal opinion, if you are not a transgendered individual, and if you clearly are not somebody who's ambiguous in how you present yourself, there's no need for you to write your pronouns in the bio. I honestly think it's a bit ludicrous for that, but hey, it is the reality. Some people get it how they live, right? So let us continue, people. In late 2020 and early 2021, Gen Z was the only US generation in which a majority believe there are more than two genders. As recently as the first half of 2020, this was a minority opinion even among Gen Zers, a remarkable amount of change over just 6 months. In contrast, there was only a small uptick in this belief among older generations. Wow. Wowzers. Hey, Gen Z, man. Hey, guys, Gen Z is kind of out there on certain topics. Uh, is Gen Z out there on this topic? Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Gen Z is definitely way out there on this topic. Other generations are looking at us like, what are you guys talking about? They're very, very puzzled. And I'm gonna be honest with you, as a Gen Zer myself, I am a bit puzzled too. And I wonder why Gen Z made this change after 2020, as recently as the first half of I guess during 2020 this change was made. Now we do understand that during 2020 there was a certain uh ailment which was ailing the planet. I'm not gonna mention that on YouTube. We all know YouTube has had its drama with regarding that the any mentions of that ailment in the past few years. But yeah, that certain ailment required us to stay at home. And I think that might have had something to do with that. Gen Z, and I think every single other generation, but especially Gen Z, were locked in their house. They couldn't go anywhere, and they were consuming a bunch of content on social media. And social media tends to be one of the places where, you know, uh, ideas of gender fluidity tends to be pushed the most. And if Gen Z was exposed to that for an extended period of time, then this would definitely explain this shift in belief and this shift in ideology, dare I say. So next, so here is the graph, right, which shows us the belief, right? It shows us the belief by generations. Where's the I I had the generation listed here. There it is. So as we can see here, boomers, 33% of boomers believe that there are more than two genders. I am surprised by that number. We've lost our graph again. Come on. But yeah, 33% of boomers believe that, and 51% of Gen Z believes that. That's insane. Yeah, 51% of Gen Z. I'm not surprised by that. But 33% of boomers. Wow. If that's not surprising, I don't know what is. Moving on, guys. Let's let's see. Let's read this next individual's testimony. Audrey Mason Hyde was assigned female at birth, but likes wearing bow ties and other clothing typically associated with men. In interviews, Audrey has said she, her pronouns are fine, though she doesn't like to be referred to as a girl or a boy. For a while, Audrey identified as a tomboy, but doesn't feel that captured who she really was. At 12, Audrey gave a TED talk about being non binary. For me, gender is a spectrum. My gender identity and expression is entirely about me and not about how other people perceive me. I don't know how we deal with that in a world so desperate to define by gender, she said. Later in an interview, she shared, "Now, being non-binary, I feel so comfortable to just be that, and so uncomfortable to be a boy or a girl. It's just not who I am." Whew, okay, I'm about to make a few people mad here. The thing about life is we need classifications, folks. We just do. You see, we need to know how to distinguish a cow from a goat, or else we just say, hey, you're going to eat an animal, you'll eat the big animal, and here's a small animal. Okay, I'll eat the big animal on four legs. Are you talking about a cow? Are you talking about a horse? Are you talking about a buffalo? Are you talking about an elephant? Different parts of the world, depending on where you are, you could be talking about a host of animals, but we need identifiers to identify things, and that's not even to be mischievous or to have uh some devious intentions, but it's just to essentially classify the world in a manner for us to be able to move much more efficiently. And in my honest and humble opinion, Gen Z's infatuations with this fluidity of genders is not doing it any benefits. It's not helping it progress economically. I hope, at least at the bare minimum, that this new and this new movement of gender fluidity is at least helping people whom whom identify who identify as being gender fluid. It's helping them with their mental state. At the bare minimum, I hope so, because if not, then this entire movement is for naught, and that's saying a lot there. Let's scroll down here. Let's look at the data. uh Until recently, it was unclear just how common being transgender or non binary was, and whether there were any generational differences in the number who identified this way. With most estimates suggesting transgender people were. What's going on here? This just jumped on me. What's going on here? Come on. With most estimates suggesting transgender people were less than 1% of the population, a large sample is necessary to get accurate numbers. That type of data is finally available. Starting in June 2011, the US Census Bureau offered four options on its housing poll survey question about gender: male, female, transgender, and none of these. The last, a rough gauge of those who identify as non binary, gender fluid, or or another gender identity. With more than 1 million respondents, the survey is large enough to provide accurate estimates. The results are clear. Gen Z young adults are much more likely to report identifying as either trans or non binary than any other generation. While only 1 out of 1,000 boomers report they are transgender, that's 1/10%. 23 out of 1,000 Gen Z young adults, that's 2.3%, identify as trans. 20 times more. By this estimate, there are now more trans young adults in the US than the number of people living in Boston, Massachusetts. Whew. Well, guys, the stats are here, the data's here. We're living in a changing world. Dare I say, though, this subject of transgenderism has garnered a lot of attention, and I'm going to say a lot of it is in bad faith, especially by conservative groups which want to use this topic and this discussion to further their agenda of essentially creating a culture war. And that's very true. But I will say this, this discussion has certainly become much more prominent, especially among younger circles such as Gen Z. You go onto any college campus, especially much more liberal leaning campuses around the United States, and most universities and most academic faculty members tend to be left leaning. By the way, that's just the reality according to various studies. Approximately 70 to 80% of professors of higher learning tend to be left leaning, and this agenda is well, not agenda, but this ideology of gender fluidity is certainly promulgated within those circles. Now, of course, if you're attending a university like Liberty University, no, this is not going to be discussed there. This is not going to be an ideology that most students agree with on campus. Yes, we know that. If you're going to Brigham Young, yes, we know. We know. But for the most part, most college students are very welcoming of this ideology, and most college age students nowadays would certainly be Gen Zers. Hello, my fellow Gen Zers. And the statistics are clear here. Gender fluidity is a huge topic. It is a huge topic within our generation. Certainly, no doubt. Certainly much more than in comparison to other generations. As you can see here, fewer than 1% of boomers identify as non-binary compared to more than 3% of Gen Z young adults. Combined with the more than 2% who are trans, that means 1 out of 18 young adults identified as something other than male or female in 2020 and in 2021 and 2022, with 39 million 18 to 26 year olds in the US. About 2 million young adults identify as trans or non binary, more than the population of Phoenix, the fifth largest city in the country. Okay, okay. I don't know, folks. I don't know about this. I don't. I That is a large percentage. That is a significant percentage. And just in my humble opinion, I do believe that there are a lot of individuals who believe that who essentially identify as non-binary or gender fluid simply because it may garner them attention, even if they are not necessarily a part of that community, or even if they don't fit that mold, they may just jump on the bandwagon. And when this topic is garnering the cultural cachet which it has over the past few years, why not get on the bandwagon? You can either get on the bandwagon to just hate all LGBTQ people, or hate gender fluidity and the non-binary movement, or you can get on the bandwagon to just be gender fluid or non-binary, even if you truly don't identify as such, even if you're just a regular tomboy, or you might be a guy who just likes more effeminate things than most other men. This is a very polarizing topic, guys. So this is the percentage of adults who identify as transgender or non-binary by generation. As we can see here, Gen Z is leading all other generations here. Wait, hold up. Yeah, Gen Z is over here leading all other generations. Yep, that's Gen Z for you. Um, that is certainly is Gen Z for you. 2.3% identify as transgender, and 3.3% of Gen Z identify as non-binary. Well, hey, there's the data. Let's see if there's anything else which we can scope out from this magazine here. We can scroll down a little bit. Uh, the population of transgender young adults in the U.S. grew from about 220,000 in 2014 to about 900,000 in 2021, an increase of 680,000 people. That is a lot, guys. And I don't know if this can be explained by just a cultural movement, or if this can be explained by people essentially adopting uh transgenderism simply because they feel much more comfortable, since they have a they're much more connected to the community, or to a community of transgender people, especially through various mediums such as social media, um whatnot. And they may have more communities which are much more welcoming. I think that might be able to explain it, but I'm not sure if that can explain this huge increase. It has to be questioned, guys. Everything must be questioned. But once again, one thing I have to say on this channel: we do not promote hatred or harm to anyone. I love and respect my LGBTQIA plus LMNOP brothers here, brothers and sisters, and non-binary folk them. And yes, I'm just cracking a joke. Don't get your panties in a bunch. But look, everything must be questioned. This is a huge increase. And honestly, I think this topic is it's been beaten to death. This topic is discussed way too much, but it is an integral part of Gen Z. Believe it or not, this is a defining characteristic of Gen Z, which clearly separates Gen Z from other generations. So I think it deserves and merits, certainly, it doesn't merit all of the attention that it is currently getting, but I do believe that this topic does merit some attention. Let's finish here looking at some more graphs. This is the percentage of 18 to 22-year-olds identifying as non-binary and transgender. So approximately 3%, and for non-binary, and 2% for transgender, as we discussed earlier. Um, if these generational differences are real, they should be reflected in behaviors, and they are. Several studies have reported increases in the number of people coming to transgender medical clinics. For example, an article in Pediatrics report that the number of youth seeking treatment at the Kaiser Permanente Northern California Pediatric Transgender Clinic increased from 30 in the first half of 2015 to 154 in the first half of 2018, an increase of 5 times in just 3 years. Over these years, 3 out of 4 patients were assigned female at birth, also consistent with the survey data. Well, transgenderism in children is definitely a topic which the conservatives have been leaning on, and they're definitely bringing it to the forefront in the cultural wars. Now, do I believe that children should undergo uh, transgender treatment? That should be left to the parents, but I really hope that the parents of these children analyze the circumstances regarding how they're providing these children treatment, and how that's going to impact their futures, and that's how that's going to impact their lives down the road. I believe that nowadays we live in a society where people make long-term decisions based on short-term emotions, and that is a recipe for disaster, dare I say. Now, am I saying in this situation that it's definitely a recipe for disaster? I'll be honest with you, I do not know. But this is man, this is a frontier which we haven't experienced yet. We're exploring brand new frontier here. Why is Gen Z, particularly those assigned female at birth, more likely to identify as transgender? There are no clear answers, only theories. It could be that Gen Z young adults are more likely to know the term transgender than older generations, but you'd expect that older people who identify as a gender different from that on their birth certificates would know the term, even if cisgendered people didn't. Perhaps the increasing societal acceptance of transgender identities has allowed more people to come out as transgender. If growing acceptance were the only factor, though, the number of transgender people should have increased among older generations as well, but it didn't. However, it would take very large number of trans people, 27 and older. Yeah, older generations just aren't as accepting of transgenderism and non-binary gender ideology as younger people are, Gen Zers specifically, and that's to be expected. That is certainly to be expected. Uh, like here it says, rural and urban location didn't make much of a difference. Hmm. So the percentage of transgender Gen Zers was about the same in rural areas as in suburban and slash urban slash suburban areas. That is surprising. I would think that in rural areas, this would be something which would probably be nearly non existent, but apparently it's not. So there's definitely some merit to this. There's definitely some merit to this. Huh. And their political affiliation, the political affiliation of the residency of their state. Huh. As you can see here, there are more transgender people in blue states versus red states. Well, folks, I mean this is pretty much it. Let's scroll down further some more. Let's conclude this article here. This video. Wow, we're past 30 minutes, guys. Whew, the Gen Zer guys, I'm here. I'm working for you guys. I'm gonna keep bringing you these videos, but let's finish this up here. What will these changes around gender identity mean going forward? It has become common to cite the statistic that only a half of 1% of people are transgender. Although that is true for older adults, it is no longer true among 18 to 22-year-olds in the US, where 3%, six times as many, identify as transgender, and nearly 5% identify as non binary. The last few years have seen increasingly contentious debate around transgender rights, and these numbers suggest that the topic is unlikely to fade in importance. In particular, the large generational difference in gender identity suggests an intensifying need for empathy, understanding, and communication across generations in the years to come. I certainly agree with that last sentence. We definitely do need a lot of empathy in addressing this issue. We certainly do. But I want to say this: we have to question everything and we have to be skeptical. That's the only way which good ideas or great ideas will come to prominence and will reign. I think regarding this issue of non-binary and gender fluidity, there's a lot of people who just isolate themselves within their camps. They isolate themselves within on the side of the issue which they are proponents of, and they don't want to come to the public square to debate. Look, I know it can be difficult if you, especially if you're transgender or non-binary, and you feel that somebody is essentially invalidating your existence. But in order to show that your existence matters, and in order to show the validity of your sexual identity, and prove it to the rest of the country, it is certainly necessary for you to come to the public square and discuss and debate. And that's something which I wish to bring here on the Gen Zero. So do you guys agree that there are more than two genders? Do you guys agree with Gen Z on the topic? Or do you guys disagree with Gen Z on the topic? Let me know down in the description. Let me know down in the comments below. And also, guys, please drop a like if you like this video. Or if you don't like this video, drop a dislike. Let the algorithm know exactly how you feel about us here. And guys, please go ahead and subscribe. There are certainly much more topics coming your way because there are more videos regarding more topics about Gen Z coming your way. Because as you guys know, this is the Gen Zer, and I'm out. Peace.